reconvene, and we have the private members' business, the Animal Health and Welfare Ban on Fox Hunting Bill 2025, second stage. This will conclude at 12 o'clock. I now call on Deputy Ruth Coppinger to move the second reading of the motion.
I so move the second stage of the bill.
Okay, yeah.
Go? Okay. So we're here today on a historic occasion. This is the first bill in Dail to specifically outlaw fox hunting. There have been attempts to ban a range of blood sports before. Now, the origins of fox hunting are around the 1400s. It would seem foxes were being on farmland, and people rounded up a dog to get rid of them. But this became a formal sport in the 19th century by the British, our colonial rulers, dressed in master attire, all of the trappings of hierarchy, and Oscar Wilde's famous phrase, "the unspeakable in pursuit of the uneatable," still applies. However, the personnel have changed socially, but we have to say it's ironic that in 1919, Sinn Fein, for example, which is the forerunner of the three big parties in the Dáil today, ran a campaign of disruption of fox hunts in protest at the release of prisoners for independence, precisely because fox hunting was carried out by the landed gentry. So the participants may be different, but it's certainly ironic that the three big parties in the Dáil that profess to be nationalist maintain this when it's been banned in the UK for over 20 years. Now, there's overwhelming opposition to fox hunting in this country, so just let's be very clear on that from the outset. It is not popular whatsoever. All regions, all ages, we've heard some of the ministers banging a rural-urban drum all week, but 73% of people in the most recent poll are opposed to fox hunting, and only 12% expressed any support for it. But we're going to keep hearing that this is a rural versus urban issue. The stats say otherwise. In Connacht Ulster, in that poll, 73% of people were opposed, and in Dublin it was 76%. It's virtually the same feeling. The importance of the fox in Irish folklore, in Irish history, as well needs to be said, because it's been demonised. A native species, important to our biodiversity, playing a very important role as a pollinator in our ecosystem, spreading seeds as well. Now, I want to start with what happens on a fox hunt, because we're going to hear a lot of things, but this is about cruelty to animals. The Irish Council Against Blood Sports provide a very good description. The dogs are sent into an area to scent out a fox and force it to break cover. The chase begins and can continue for an hour or more. This part of the hunt provides the field, the riders with the excitement they crave as they hurdle fences, ditches and walls in pursuit of the fox. The fox will go anywhere to escape the hounds. He will try to go to earth down a foxhole, drain or a badger set, but these escapes are likely to have been blocked the night before by hunt supporters. Very sporting. The fox will run among sheep and other livestock, the hounds following in pursuit, resulting in the livestock being scattered and put under stress. If he cannot escape, the fox is chased to exhaustion, at which point he'll be caught and savaged to death by the hounds. Foxhounds are bred for stamina, by the way, not for speed, so that this whole thing is elongated and is drawn out for as long as possible. Otherwise, the fox will be caught too soon and the enjoyment will be spoilt. Often a fox will succeed in finding an unblocked refuge, and what can happen then, because I don't have time to go into it, they can be dug out later with shovels, or the terrier men can be sent for, and either way, it's a horrific ending for the fox. Now, just to be clear, because yesterday I was in a debate and the person I was debating said, "Oh, the fox is so wily, it's so cute," as if they enjoyed this. This is from people who study animal behaviour, not from some TD off the top of their head. For the fox, there's heightened fear, exhaustion, loss of motor control. At the Burns inquiry, which was done before they banned fox hunting in England and Wales, they found the fox had severe mental trauma, but also the other animals in this barbaric process. Horses suffer too. They're forced to run and jump. This is a prey animal whose first primary instinct is flight. Hounds also are hidden victims. They can be injured and often dumped when they're no longer of use, as we know, and shot by their owners. Why is this barbarism maintained? Now, the argument from one party, Sinn Féin, to people was that it would go underground, we need to regulate it. It's actually practically underground anyway, because the evidence of criminal adjacent behaviour, if people had attended the briefing that we had last week, foxes are often brought to dogfights. They're put in a sack when they're caught and brought to dogfights, according to wildlife rescuers who have found them consistent with those sorts of injuries. In a survey done by the Journal, foxes sell for €100 and there's about 4,500 members of illegal hunt clubs. There's also money in this. As with everything, this is what is keeping it going. There's a tourism around fox hunting because it's been banned in the UK, and there's money in it for those who organise the hunts. Again, I don't have time to go into all of that. I want to deal very quickly with some of the issues in relation to foxes and farming. As I said, they keep down rodents, very important for arable farming as well. Rabbits can cost arable farmers a lot of money. Sorry? Oh, sorry, I thought you said. The fox is portrayed as being a threat to sheep and to livestock. The biggest threat to lambs is weather, starvation, disease. They're the leading causes of lamb mortality. 1% of lambs are estimated to be lost to foxes. Hill farming, it may be slightly more. Let's have grants to help hill farmers deal with that. But good husbandry, fencing are the way around this. We keep hearing that we need to keep down fox numbers. If a cull is needed, it's up to the Department of Agriculture to organise that. It wouldn't be up to a Wild West situation of leaving it to individual fox hunts. We keep hearing as well about the equine industry, and just to say in the UCD report that less than 5% of our equine sector is reliant on hunting. We have a huge potential as well to expand the equine sector. A love of working class kids and ordinary people who can't get access to horses because it's still elitist. For example, trekking and so on. Now, last week in the Dáil, there was a bill here on dog welfare. And I read after about, I nearly know the names of all of the TD's dogs at this point, because we heard from Sinn Féin, Fianna Fail, Fine Gael about how they love their dogs. A fox is a dog. Modra Rua, it's a wild dog. Why is a wild dog of less importance? Why are you okay, if you vote here tonight against my bill, why are you okay with wild dogs being hounded like this? Domestic dogs kill sheep, they bite children, some of them kill humans, and yet we don't advocate that they be hunted down. Now, the Irish Wildlife Trust has answered a lot of these arguments, and the NSPCA as well. Both are fully backing this bill. I want to also talk about some of the myths that rural people just love fox hunting, and nothing could be further from the truth. Again, due to time, I won't have time to read out, but so many people have contacted my office in relation to this, about how they arrogantly come into their property, trespassing their lands, terrorise those. We had the situation of a woman who contacted my office and spoke then to the Irish Independent in Kildare Minister. Agnes was her name. Her sister is profoundly disabled. The hounds invaded their garden in Kildare. The two women were traumatised listening to them savaging the fox. The shrill cries from the fox they tried to drown out with playing very loud music in their house. This woman couldn't eat for about a week after. Do you think that's okay? And yet you will stand up and tell us that rural people, this is a pursuit and it's part of their tradition. Rural people do not love fox hunting. So, it's a minority participation, 2% according to the most recent poll. We also hear that ground birds, suddenly some people are concerned about wildlife. The reason that ground birds are under threat, of course a fox will go after a pheasant or a ground bird. It's a natural instinct. The reason that ground birds are under threat is development, habitat destruction, and all of the issues that we know in terms of modernisation, urbanisation. I want to also mention a fact that isn't stated, which is the research showing the link between cruelty to animals and cruelty to humans. If you allow this type of barbarism You are immunising people against inflicting harm on others. For example, in school shootings in the US, 43% of the shooters had abused animals. And there's many, many more examples. In 2017, 89% of women who had companion animals in an abusive relationship reported that the abuser had abused the animals as well. It's a well-known fact that if you abuse animals, you are immunised against abusing humans. I don't have time to go in, but I will in the sum-up about the whip system. Okay. But it's absolutely outrageous that this has been used to prevent the popular will.
Thank you, Deputy. And now calling Deputy Roderic O'Gorman.
Thanks, Chair. And I want to thank Deputy Coppinger for bringing forward this important piece of legislation today, which I and the Green Party will be strongly supporting. And along with the bill on dog breeding last week, it's a welcome opportunity for this House to focus on some of the more extreme and frankly indefensible practices which animals in this country are subject to. And Minister, I want to speak very directly about this. There is simply no justifiable reason for this state to permit the hunting and killing of foxes with dogs. It's not a reasonable method to control the fox population. It's not, as some have argued, a means of protecting biodiversity, and it is not an intrinsic part of rural life in Ireland. And in spite of the immovable political positions adopted by some of the largest parties in this House, it is absolutely not something that is supported by the majority of people in Ireland either, in either rural or urban Ireland. And last week, speaking on Deputy Whitmore's bill on puppy farming, I made the same point. People in every part of our country, when they hear about how animals can be treated legally in this country, they are overwhelmingly in favour of eliminating and banning these most heinous, most cruel practices. So we're left wondering why those parties that claim to have the broadest support seem so entrenched, so immovable, when even their own constituents are asking for change. Now, I have little doubt in the course of this debate this morning, some of those opposing Deputy Coppinger's bill will try and reduce this to another front in the culture wars. And as I said last week, when anyone tries to do something on the issue of animal welfare, the battle is immense. Those of us who are advocating for change were accused of trying to destroy country life, of being out of touch, of being elite. So let me be very clear about what I say so others can't misrepresent me. I believe it is wrong to kill animals for fun, for pleasure. And that's what fox hunting ultimately is about, the killing of an animal in a social setting for human enjoyment. I recognise that farmers have to take measures to protect sheep, to protect poultry. Sometimes foxes will be shot. It's not something that I might like personally, but I recognise it is a reality of farming in our country. But that is not what we are discussing today. We are discussing the organised pursuit and killing by mauling to death by dogs of a small animal for the enjoyment of a group of people who see this as a social event. And in the same way that Irish law has outlawed the killing of dogs in dogfighting for fun, or have outlawed the baiting of bulls and bears and badgers over history for fun, I believe it is now important for us to take that step to ban the killing of foxes for fun. I would like to raise maybe just one slight point of difference with Deputy Coppinger on the bill. Her bill seeks to outlaw drag hunting, and she rightfully points out that in England drag hunting... Okay, well look, I'll step back from that point because I think it is important. There is at least one drag hunt in Ireland. It's not my thing, but as long as a fox isn't being killed, I'm not particularly concerned about that. And I think it is important that we keep the focus here on the central issue, which is using legislation to ban the killing of foxes, the killing of animals for pleasure. We've had the opportunity on 3 occasions now in this House over the last 5 weeks to discuss issues of animal welfare, issues to do with greyhounds, issues to do with dog breeding, issues to do with fox hunting today. And Deputy Coppinger has already pointed in the debate on the puppy farming bill last week, there was real passion among deputies. Deputies spoke with real meaning about what their dog meant to them, what their pet meant to them. But today we have another opportunity to make real change. We have another opportunity to outlaw a practice that has long past a time needed outlawing in this country. Ireland's laws have banned cruel practices, killing animals in the past on a range of areas, and it's time we took this opportunity today, and I urge deputies to support this piece of legislation.
Thank you, Deputy. And I call on Deputy Seamus Healy.
I welcome and support this bill, and I thank Deputy Coppinger for bringing it forward. The supporters of fox hunting like to present this issue as a rural versus urban one. Nothing, of course, could be further from the truth. This issue actually unites urban and rural communities. Every poll and every survey shows that a significant majority of the public, both urban and rural, are opposed to fox hunting and want a ban introduced. I myself live in the countryside, a small town called Dail West in the foothills of the Cumra Mountains, just on the edge of Clonmel. I was born there, in a house that had no running water, no flush toilet. We had 5 acres, 2 cows for milking, a couple of calves, 2 pigs, a flock of hens for eggs, a flock of turkeys for the Christmas market, a small orchard, apples, gooseberry bushes and blackcurrant bushes for apple tarts and jam, and a kitchen garden for potatoes and vegetables. Couldn't be much more rural than that. I trekked across the Cumra and Knockmeal Down mountains since childhood, given many a summer's day with the local postman, the late George Conway. And during that time, I learned to love and respect animals in their natural environment. My late uncle was a small farmer. One of my siblings is a small farmer. I don't claim to be an expert on rural affairs, but I do know a little bit about it. And farmers I talk to hate to see the hunt arrive, because these people, wealthy elites on horseback, think they have a God-given right to trespass on farmers' lands, to leave gates open, to break fences, to damage crops and to scatter livestock. And by the way, there's not a single item in this bill that prevents farmers from protecting his or her livestock. Fox hunting, Minister, is a barbaric activity, and animal cruelty by wealthy, well-heeled elites on horseback is a bridge too far. This bill is reasonable, it's common sense and it's humane, and I believe it should be supported. Minister, last Friday we all got this glossy brochure in our pigeonholes, a clear indication of the wealth and power that's behind the fox hunting lobby. And by the way, the water diviner on the front of this brochure with the hazel stick is surely a colleague of the man that divined my water supply over 50 years ago. And the other thing that jumps out of this glossy brochure is that apparently Tony Blair regrets bringing in a ban on fox hunting. I'll tell you, Minister, I'll take no lectures from Tony Blair. A British imperialist warmonger who's responsible for the deaths of thousands of Iraqi civilians, men, women and children. I haven't heard him regret that. I haven't heard him regret the British genocide in Ireland in the 1840s and 50s, called on Gorta Moor, the famine. I haven't heard him regret the burning of the ground of Cork City 100 years ago by the Black and Tans. And I haven't heard him regret the deaths of 10 hunger strikers in the 6 counties in 1981. The fact of the matter, Minister, is that the public, as usual, are way ahead of the politicians on this issue. Way ahead of the politicians. They support a ban on fox hunting. And I would call on all the political parties to allow a free vote of members here this evening. I think it's outrageous that the whip should be applied on this issue. And I would again call on all parties to allow a free vote on this issue tonight and pass this humane and reasonable piece of legislation.
I'm delighted to have the opportunity here this morning to speak on this proposal from Deputy Coppinger, and I want to state clearly at the outset that I and my department take the matter of animal welfare most seriously. My department devotes considerable resources to protecting the well-being of animals and in dealing with breaches of animal welfare legislation when they occur. The Government is fully committed to promoting good practices that respect the welfare of all animals. On behalf of the Government, I am putting forward our stance to oppose the Animal Health and Welfare Ban on Fox Hunting Bill 2025, the reasons for which I will outline in my address this morning. The Government fully recognises the emotive nature of this policy area, which has been the subject of debate over many years. The bill, as set out by Deputy Coppinger, proposes to amend Section 12 out of the Animal Health and Welfare Act 2013, which currently provides an exemption for lawfully hunting an animal. Deputies will be aware that Section 12 of the Animal Health and Welfare Act was already fully discussed in and approved by the Oireachtas previously. It is important to note that hunting in Ireland today is not unregulated. It operates under clear codes of conduct, licensing, welfare standards and full insurance requirements. In accordance with Section 25 of the Animal Health and Welfare Act, codes of conduct have been adopted by the members of the Hunting Association of Ireland, which detail the conduct to be adhered to in respect of the hunting of foxes and treatment of the animal during the hunt. The codes also take into account local concerns and the concerns of landowners on which hunting takes place. Foxes are not a protected species under the Wildlife Act in Ireland, and it is legal to hunt foxes under the legislation. I understand that the Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage has no plans to change the legislation with regard to foxes at this time. Where a specific case of animal neglect or cruelty is identified, offences may be prosecuted under the Act. There are strict penalties that apply for offences under Section 12 of this Act. Offences are liable on summary conviction to a Class A fine to a maximum of €5,000 or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 6 months, or both. On conviction of indictment, a fine not exceeding €250,000 or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, or both. In addition to these existing legislative protections, I believe it is important to frame the context of today's debate beyond that of the binary choice that you're either with us or against us. To do so is deeply cynical and exploitative, and allows for the serious issue of animal welfare to be used as a Trojan horse for a more divisive agenda. I've heard deputies in this House that support a ban say they never met anyone who has been on a hunt, indeed haven't seen a hunt themselves. I find it incredible, Cathaoirleach, that this is used as a selling point to advocate for a ban, that no attempt would be made to engage with the very community and cohort of people that will be most affected by such a move, that no effort will be undertaken to try and understand the opposite point of view. Decisions could be made here today that fundamentally change people's lives and that of their communities, and those making that decision would remain entirely oblivious of the consequences by virtue of the fact that the activity is invisible to them. Again, I want to recognise that this is a deeply emotive issue, one which people on both sides of the argument feel very passionately about. Fox hunting represents a long-held tradition and is a part of a way of life for those involved. And while it's not an activity that the vast majority of people engage in, it does mean an awful lot to the people who do. For those people employed by hunting associations or in the kennels, who care for the dogs and the horses, they have woken up this morning not knowing if there is a future for their job or for their animals when they go to bed tonight. I believe it is entirely disproportionate to try to overnight make criminals of these people for engaging in an activity that in many cases stretches back generations. And beyond those directly affected, we must also be conscious of the wider negative impacts this could have. For the farriers and the vets who benefit from their business, for the feed suppliers who rely on their custom, for farmers who avail of the fallen animal collection service they provide, which is most important, for local hospitality in places where commerce can be quiet, especially during the winter season. Indeed, for the wider Irish equine sector too, as we close down pathways for young riders passionate about horses, as we undermine the same associations that run our point-to-points so successfully, and as we lose important jobs and economic activity in rural areas where there are fewer alternatives. But here, look, I also want to reference the legislation itself. The bill, as it's formed and as it's worded, proposes to ban all hunting for foxes, regardless of the purpose of that hunting and the manner in which it is carried out. It also proposes a ban on trail hunting. So to Deputy Roderic O'Gorman's point, who accepts that farmers need to shoot foxes on occasion as a control mechanism, under this bill, that activity would be illegal into the future. And Deputy Healy touched on that as well, that there is an understanding, I gather from you, that that normal activity could still happen. Under this bill, that activity would not be permissible at all. As such, this bill would ban hunting of foxes with hounds, trail hunting with hounds and shooting of foxes for pest control, which is carried out to protect livestock and also forms an important source of foxes for disease surveillance purposes. Cathaoirleach, Ireland is officially free of the zoonotic tapeworm Echinococcus multilocularis. This is a really severe tapeworm that causes debilitating diseases in humans. Annual surveillance in shot foxes provides evidence to prove the absence of the disease here in Ireland, which allows us to require that all dogs entering the country are given preventative treatment prior to their arrival here, thus protecting public health as well as domestic pets and wildlife. This work would not be possible under the legislation as is proposed before the House here today. In relation to the pest control point, while attempts have been made to downplay this, the reality is that foxes do prey on livestock and on other wildlife, such as rare ground nesting birds, something the Deputy Coppinger actually admitted to here in her opening address. I haven't seen many accounts online seeking to play on people's emotions, posting photos of dead lambs or hens that have been attacked by foxes. And we all know that anybody who's had some backyard hens generally always has a story about a night the fox came. Research shows that red foxes are widespread across Ireland and can be found in every county. The nature of Ireland's widely farmed, fragmented landscape and the absence of an apex predator means it lends itself to high fox densities. Indeed, Deputy Coppinger listed many of the animals that the fox is a predator to in her opening address, acknowledging that the fox doesn't have a natural predator themselves. Hunting provides one of the necessary means of controlling the fox population in Ireland. The truth of the matter is, Deputy Coppinger and People Before Profit are pursuing this as a wedge issue, specifically designed to be emotive and confrontational. If they were really being honest, this is only a starting point for them. I have no doubt there are many other rural activities they'd also like to ban. And if they get their way here today, it's not where it will stop. Cathaoirleach, it is not where it would stop. Before long, People Before Profit would have us back here debating legislation, no doubt, to ban fishing because of the impact it would have on the worm and the mayfly. The profile of animal welfare has never been higher, and its prominence that it receives in national, regional and social media reflects the seriousness with which this issue is treated by stakeholders, welfare groups, the public and by this government. On the 19th of November, I launched a 6-week public consultation that will run till early January 2026, inviting views to inform the development of a new animal welfare strategy for the period 2026 to 2030. I would encourage all interested stakeholders to provide feedback, comment and make recommendations around the direction, themes and trust of the new animal health and welfare strategy. To legislate in isolation and not on the basis of consultation and evidence risks unintended consequences and laws that do not work in practice. And before I conclude, Cathaoirleach, I do want to touch on one last point, something that has been raised in the earlier contributions here and no doubt will continue to be, about a potential urban-rural divide. And I want to absolutely agree with the contributors here who say this isn't and shouldn't be about an urban-rural divide. I don't believe it is either. This bill would be much better divided along the lines of those who believe we can achieve so much more when we work to understand each other's perspective, rather than those who believe having the loudest voice in the room gives them the right to dictate how everyone else should live their lives. And that's an important point that I hope is reflected in this debate today. Cathaoirleach, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill.
Thank you, Minister. We now go back to the Independent Party Technical Group. You have 10 minutes. I believe it's split 5 and 5. So, Deputy Paul Murphy, you have 5 minutes.
Thanks a lot. Minister, you're defending the indefensible, and I think you know it. You're defending cruel, barbaric practices. You're defending the organised killing for human entertainment of a tiny minority of foxes. And then you try to do it in in a way to suggest that it shouldn't be divided along urban and rural lines, having simply 2 minutes previously saying that this is a wedge issue for us designed to be emotive and confrontational, and there's many other rural activities we'd like to ban. So on the one hand you say we shouldn't be pitching it as urban and rural, we agree, but on the other hand you are doing precisely that. You say that we are presenting this as a binary issue. I mean, I don't know, weren't clear on what non-binary way you want to present it. Some of us are opposed to fox hunting. We're opposed to this cruel, barbaric practice. We think that it must go the way of dog fighting. I don't know if you had a problem with the banning of dog fighting. We're opposed to the way of badger baiting. It should be banned immediately. Others don't agree with that. You think that this should continue. That is a binary issue. I'm sorry if that offends you in some way. When you're mentioning, I think you didn't say rural pursuit, instead you went for rural activities, because of course it brings us back into the presidential election, whereby fox hunting played an unexpectedly outsized role in the campaign as an illustration of how incredibly out of touch Heather Humphreys was, with her continued invocation of rural pursuits and her enthusiastic support for fox hunting, not shared by the vast majority of the public. And it was, in the end, the anti-fox hunting candidate won, the pro-fox hunting candidate lost, and it was a strong illustration for people of this person is wildly out of touch. It's therefore deeply ironic that we're going to have a vote tonight in the Dáil where it seems that the three big parties are going to continue to be out of touch, not take the lesson of that presidential election and vote to allow this cruel practice to continue. The other arguments that you made, I mean, the only way you can defend the indefensible is with misinformation and a divisive approach. The suggestion that this is about pest control. I mean, firstly, to be clear, it's misinformation to say that our bill bans shooting of foxes. Of course it doesn't, explicitly doesn't. Hunting, fox hunting, fox hunting. If you have a problem with it's about fox hunting. Right? That's what the bill is about. People can go and read it online. If you had a problem, and this is what you would often do, if you agreed with, so if you want to come back in the sum up and say, we agree with a ban on fox hunting, but we have a problem with some of the wording, the way that it's done, no problem. Then what is done is it's passed at second stage and it's amended at committee stage. The point in terms of the ban on trail hunting is there because precisely this has been used in Britain as a way of continuing kind of undercover, underground fox hunting, and therefore, but there's no ban specified, and we support the possibility of the continuation of drag hunting. But let's be real in terms of the argument about pest control. Saoirse McHugh makes a really good point in the paper today. I don't think anybody believes that getting a pack of 50 dogs and 50 people on horseback to chase a single fox to exhaustion is a reasonable or efficient form of pest control. Foxes are no threat to anyone or anyone's livelihood. They are beautiful, intelligent animals that play a vital role in our ecosystem. Tearing them limb from limb is not a sport. It is not an ancient Irish tradition. It is not a rural pursuit. It's an alien bloodlust imported into this country by a colonial aristocracy. The Irish Masters of Foxhounds Association was established in 1845 during the famine that Seamus referred to. While ordinary people were starving to death, there was aristocrats in red coats riding around on horseback, torturing animals to death. That's what this tradition is about. And I have to put it to Sinn Féin. What are you thinking? What are you thinking about supporting this colonial practice? If you don't come to your senses, if you don't change your party's position on this, I hope at the very least you will allow a free vote. Surely you know that this is going to be done away with. Like, we are not, in 20 years' time, going to have a continuation of fox hunting in this country. Surely a majority of the Sinn Féin membership supports a ban on fox hunting. I certainly know those I worked with in the presidential campaign were laughing at Heather Humphreys and her support of rural pursuits and her defence of fox hunting, and supporting Catherine Connolly oppose it. If not, surely some of you will break with the party whip and vote with the people who are overwhelmingly opposed, urban or rural, overwhelmingly opposed to fox hunting.
Thank you. Members, can I just maybe make a point that we shouldn't be referring to people who aren't in the House and maybe can't defend themselves I'm asked to pass that on.
It's hard to talk in the dog without referring
Well,
to people
I'm
around
only
you there.
passing on the rules of the House. You shouldn't be referring to people outside, okay? So, Deputy Boyd Barrett.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Deputy Coppinger for bringing this bill forward, and I'm very, very happy to support it. Now, I love sport. I'm passionate about sport, but I really find it hard to understand how anybody could imagine or gain entertainment from a large group of people on horseback with a pack of dogs pursuing a frightened animal, and then watching and celebrating as that frightened animal is torn to pieces by dogs. I mean, that is not a sport. That is just an exercise in cruelty and barbarism. And as has been said, this isn't an ancient Irish tradition, Irish rural tradition. It's a colonial pursuit that was developed by the British nobility. And I think the point about the sort of contrast between the starvation of the Irish people, the enforced starvation of the Irish people during the famine, and the expansion of so-called rural pursuits by the British nobility. I mean, there is a connection, actually, because, of course, the genocide of the Irish people during what is known as the famine was linked to an ambition by our colonial masters to drive the people off the land, to clear the land. It was an accelerated version of the enclosure movement where the rich wanted to drive ordinary people off the land to clear it for their so-called pursuits. And so it is tied up. I mean, it's sort of ironic in a way that those who defend this practice, although it's interesting that the Minister doesn't actually defend the practice. He doesn't defend it at all. You didn't. You didn't. What you did is you tried to misrepresent the bill. That's what you did. You said there were things in the bill that are not in the bill, and then you implied that really this was part of a wider agenda of opposing rural pursuits, which is absolutely not. But you didn't actually defend it. You didn't actually defend it because you know it's indefensible. It is utterly indefensible. And please tell me how this is a legitimate form of support to tear a frightened animal limb from limb with a pack of dogs, with a big gang of people on the back of horseback. It is nothing of the sort. And the idea that it has anything to do with pest control, I mean, seriously, like, it has to be the most inefficient form of pest control possibly imaginable, right? That you get a gang of horses and dogs and so on, all the associated, to chase one fox. To chase one fox, and that's, you're seriously putting that forward as a form of pest control. There's nothing to do with that. It was a sport of the nobility, a sadistic sport of the nobility, and it really is. It is just barbaric and uncivilised, and how you could possibly defend it is beyond me. And the irony, as has already been said, is our colonial masters, the British who developed this, have actually banned it themselves. But for some bizarre reason, a small group of unrepresentative people who don't represent majority opinion in this country have decided to try and defend this colonial elite practice. It's quite bizarre, to be honest, Minister, and I really think you should step back from this and reflect the views of the majority of people in this country to end this barbaric practice.
Thank you, Deputy. We now move on to the Sinn Féin Party. Deputy Martin Kenny, 5 minutes.
First of all, I'd like to thank the proposers of the motion for bringing it before the House. It's important that we have debate on all of these issues, even the issues that separate us and divide us. Every year at a Sinn Féin Ardèis, we have an opportunity to discuss various motions and set our party policy, and that is where our position comes from on this. And for many years we've had motions before our Ardèis where it has been discussed, and what normally happens is the various Cummins around the country discuss the motions in advance and have their debates, and then we debate it at the Ardèis, and we have a vote on it, and that sets our position. That's why we have the position we have in respect of this. And it comes from debate where, of course, there are different views from different people, but at the same time we recognise that across the length and breadth of Ireland there are thousands and thousands of gun clubs in practically every parish in the country. And the people who are involved in that are hunting, are also involved in conservation and everything got to do with countryside and with that tradition that sometimes goes back generations for many. And the particular part of the fox hunting, which is about horseback and all of that, is a tiny part of that. And for the most of them, I think the landed elite and the gentry are a thing of the past. The people who are involved in that now are not of that vein. Certainly, that's my experience in my part of the country. We, of course, also recognise that there has to be strict regulation, and there has to be, an acceptance that cruelty should not happen, and that should be stamped out at every opportunity. And I think those involved in my experience, those involved in these activities, do not go out there with a cruel intent. They go out there mainly because of the satisfaction they get from being involved in the hunt. Oftentimes there's not horses involved at all, they're actually on foot during the hunt. In many cases we have people who engage in this because it is something they have done, as I say, for generations in some cases. And we accept that people have a genuine fear that if you start at one place banning fox hunting, it'll be something else, it'll be something else, something else. And that's a fear that has been expressed by many people who are involved, particularly in the gun clubs around the country. And whether it's real or not, it's a real fear that they have, and I think we have to recognise that and acknowledge that as well. For very many of us, we see that the fox is, I suppose, a predator, which is dangerous certainly for sheep and indeed for ground nesting birds. And I often note that many of the people involved in the gun clubs are also involved in a lot of conservation work, and they often raise pheasants and let them out, and hen harriers and other ground nesting birds as well. And of course the fox are one of the serious predators in respect of that, and many of our farmers are asked not to mow their meadows to allow ground nesting birds, particularly rare birds, to be able to evolve and develop, and to try and to get them back into the countryside again, where they are very much an endangered species. The fox is one of the key predators in respect of that, as in fact is the pine marten and the mink, both of whom are one of whom is a protected species and another is an invasive one. And work has to be done to get rid of them. That's the reality, and it's the same thing with the fox. And we know a lot of foxes are killed not through the hunt, but actually through lamping is one of the main ways in which foxes are actually killed, where a light is shone on the fox when they're out in the fields and they stand and look back at it, and they have no sporting chance. But it's a way in which there has to be control of an animal which may be beautiful to see and all of that, but has got a very dangerous element to it when it comes to particularly our ground nesting birds, but also in regard to farm animals, particularly poultry, and indeed our sheep and the lamb sector, and particularly in our mountains. Now, we have, of course, got a decision to make on this, and we in Sinn Féin have a position. That position comes from our Ardèis, where this is debated and discussed and set out. If that position changes in the future, it will change in the future. I don't see that happening, because I see a groundswell of support from the vast majority of people around the country who recognise that this is something that has been there for a very long time. It is presented sometimes as being elitist and all of that. That has not been the experience of most people. And the majority of people who are our Sinn Féin membership have voted in respect of this and have made it very clear that they want to see this continued in a way in which it protects the environment, protects the animals, and has got at least a clear element of wildlife protection in respect of it. And hunting the fox is part of protecting other wildlife species, and that's, I think, the piece that's missing in some people who don't understand that to the full element that they need to bring understanding into it. So, in that context, I want to thank the proponents for the motion. We won't be supporting it, but that's our position, and we have a clear logic as to why that is our position.
Thank you, Deputy Reada Cronin.
Like every politician has days when their personal beliefs collide with their obligations as a party member, and today is one of those days for me. It's no secret that I want to change my party policy on fox hunting. That's on the record. But as a member of a political movement, I'm not a solo act. Grandstanding over an issue I feel very strongly about might feel righteous for a day, but it weakens us in the struggles that change and improve the lives of our constituents. Let me be clear, fox hunting is abhorrent, it's cruel, savage and barbaric, with no regard for animal welfare. I genuinely don't know why they call it a sport. Calling it a sport implies that both sides have a chance, but if the fox escapes the hunt and gets back to its den, the bloodthirsty redcoats send their hounds in to invade the fox's home, their den, dig it out and tear it apart. There's nothing sporting about that. Most people, urban and rural, don't think that's a sport, and there's lots of rural pursuits that go on, and if I ever hear that word again, that phrase again, it's too much for me. 72% of people support a ban on fox hunting, 75% in working class areas, our base. But today I'm bound by the whip, not because I think that banning fox hunting doesn't matter, but because I believe in something bigger than myself. I believe in collective struggle, social justice, equality and a united Ireland. Sinn Féin is a democratic grassroots party, and our policy is decided or that, and I have tried to change that party policy several times, and I will try again. But Sinn Féin don't do free votes. We believe in real solidarity, and we walk the hard road together. Before addressing the bill, I want to speak up for our native Irish foxes. Foxes are not a significant threat to vulnerable livestock and free-range poultry. Domestic dogs, our family pets, the pets that were all named there last week, and the hounds used in live hunts are a much bigger threat. In terms of biodiversity and the ecosystem, foxes actually play a really positive role. They are a natural pest controller, and you talk about pest control, Minister. The fox is a natural pest controller of rats, mice and rabbit populations, and an ally to arable farming. In urban and rural areas, they are the animal kingdom's equivalent to the tidy towns, eating dead and decaying birds and roadkill. The urban fox also cleans up outside waste junk food outlets, and they play a good part in that. But foxes don't have a natural predator anymore and are a threat to ground nesting birds and the curlew and the partridge. But a humane, regulated cull for the purposes of conservation is very different from blood sports. Turning to the bill, I acknowledge the intention behind the bill and chalk the Coppinger's animal welfare credentials, and I share them. But this bill is sorely lacking in practical detail. It appears to ban all fox hunting without clearly defining what kind of hunting it refers to. To be fair, Part 2C does indicate that trapping and snaring of foxes would be prohibited, but it is silent on key issues. The bill doesn't mention the legitimate humane killing of diseased or injured foxes, for instance. The bill doesn't mention poisoning, which is a far more cruel form of killing an animal, resulting in a slow and painful death for the poor fox. There's no clarity on whether a fox could shoot, whether a farmer, I don't know about foxes, I don't know if there's any clarity on whether a farmer could shoot a fox they come upon actively attacking wildlife, free-range poultry. This bill does not even mention banning hunting on horseback with hounds by the tally-hos who come over here from England ever since fox hunting was banned in Scotland, Wales and England, not to mention our own homegrown hooray Henrys. Also, including trail hunting complicates this bill unnecessarily. It's completely superfluous. It's not central to the real issue. Yet, yes, foxes on a trail hunt can get the scent of a live fox and give chase, but so too can dogs who are out for a walk with their owners, dogs out walking the land with their farmer. The central issue around fox hunting is the cruelty of the chase and the killing of the fox using a pack of hounds. That is the core concern. Everything else is political theatre. I'm sure we've all seen the emails about mission creep, the slippery slope, the thin end of the wedge. Some people seem to think that we'll be coming for their fishing rods next. And I've noticed that you, Martin Heydon, tried to add to that scaremongering. Your slip is showing, Minister. Let me reassure people that this is not a conspiracy. Cruel blood sports is where my focus is. not after anybody. Indeed, I had a friend who used to shoot rabbits and eat them because he couldn't live on the amount of money that he received in social welfare from you. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not a vegan, I'm not a vegetarian, I'm not a hypocrite. Another odd thing is that people have sent me, and they keep sending me, social media posts directed at Sinn Féin. Some posts targeting me and other Sinn Féin TDs personally. I appreciate engagement, even spirited engagement, but it's an odd level of focus on Sinn Féin, which highlights a wider issue, in my opinion. Because if this was really about getting this bill passed, the focus would be directed where the power sits, at the government, with its overwhelming majority. They are the ones who will decide whether legislation will pass or be blocked. I don't need other parties to be my social conscience. It's a regrettable trap for any opposition party of the left to direct more fire at another, rather than at the conservative forces that actually block change. It speaks to something else. It reflects a divisive politics about personal purity, purity before progress. The right must love it, because that's how they keep winning. It strengthens the status quo and the existing power strictures. Sinn Féin will continue to confront the system itself while acting collectively as a credible alternative government, but not by attacking other parties of the left. My duty as a Sinn Féin TD is to our local communities who need us to act as a team to provide an alternative government to Fianna Fail and Fine Gael. So yes, I disagree with my party policy on this issue. I've said it loud and clear, and my party doesn't expect me to pretend otherwise. But I didn't join Sinn Féin to rid Ireland of blood sports. Yes, I would love it to be a little benefit on the side. But the principal reason I joined Sinn Féin was to play a part in uniting my country. Item 1 on my agenda is unity, not the split. To my constituents who detest fox hunting as much as I do, I promise you this isn't over. I will work within my party to banish this relic of British colonialism against our native wildlife. To Sinn Féin members and supporters, the vast majority of whom oppose blood sports, we will change this by organising. We won't win by walking away. We will act collectively because we know division is the gift that the right don't even need to ask for in a political system designed to divide us. It's easy to have solidarity in your party name. It takes a bit more solidarity to actually have solidarity in your politics. And when we succeed in changing our party policy on fox hunting, we will bring forward a carefully drafted bill, a bill that will protect our beautiful, intelligent, native Irish fox, or Modrin Rua, or Shunnig Mahalia.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Matt Carthy.
I'll be voting against this bill in line with Sinn Féin policy. I've heard the calls for a free vote here, but I want to remind people that Sinn Féin is a member-led, activist-based party. Our positions are determined democratically by our members at Ardèche. And I suspect I have to say that if this were a different issue, or if Sinn Féin had a different position, those calling for a free vote now would take a very different view had we allowed one to take place. As has been said, this issue has come up at successive Sinn Féin Ardèche, and it's been debated at length, often robustly. On each occasion, though, our members have reached the same conclusion, that rural activities involving animals should be strongly relegated rather than banned outright, and that effective regulation requires serious, constructive engagement with all stakeholders, including animal welfare organisations and those who are involved in these organisations. And that's a policy that I support. And I want to say I do so without any personal or vested interest. I'm not a hunter. I'm not a horse owner. I've never attended a fox hunt, and I have no intention of doing so. But I have to say the manner in which this debate is conducted matters. And I have to also say that the vilification of people who engage in these activities or who oppose this bill is the wrong approach. It doesn't encourage understanding or debate. In fact, it shuts it down. And it ignores the reality, and it is a reality, that many people, particularly in rural communities, feel increasingly alienated by the tone of this discussion. From an animal welfare perspective, I believe that approach is absolutely counterproductive. But from a wider political and social perspective, I believe it is damaging. Those of us in this House who are serious about building a progressive left Republican alternative in this country must also be serious about unity, about common citizenship, mutual respect and shared ownership and stewardship of our land. And that requires building solidarity between rural and urban working people, not driving wedges between people. We've seen internationally what happens when rural working-class communities feel dismissed or talked down to. They disengage, they retreat. And that doesn't serve animal welfare, it doesn't serve social justice, it doesn't serve progressive politics. The suggestion that I've heard uttered that anyone voting against this bill is simply pandering to a wealthy, powerful colonial lobby is actually fanciful. I have been lobbied on this issue by people on each side of the debate. I've engaged with many animal welfare advocates, people who are passionate and who want Sinn Féin to support this bill. And the people I engaged with were sincere, informed and respectful. And I respect that. And I'm happy to engage with them, and I will continue to engage with them. But I was also contacted by many people from my own constituency, your constituency, Gael, and these were ordinary, hard-working men and women, people involved in farming, in game clubs, local community organisations. They certainly weren't wealthy or powerful. And in fact, and this is what's sometimes lost in this debate, most of them aren't involved in fox hunting at all. And what they've expressed is a broader concern, and we cannot dismiss it, or if we do it at our peril. And their concern is that this debate is part of a wider pattern in which rural life is increasingly viewed with suspicion or hostility. They see opposition not just to hunting, but to other rural pursuits in respect of farming, into one-off housing and to the social fabric of their communities. And whether you agree with that assessment or not, it cannot be ignored. Sinn Féin is a party of working people, urban and rural alike, and we engage with concerns from those communities respectfully and honestly, because we cannot build a fairer or a united Ireland without the working people of rural communities of this country, just as we can't without the working people of urban communities. But we won't earn the trust of people unless we're willing to listen and recognise the legitimacy of different lived experiences. So yes, there are people who are very passionate on both sides of this debate. There are also people asking as to why, in the week before Christmas, at a time of a severe, unrelenting pressure on the cost of living crisis, with a housing crisis going out of control, why we're dealing with such a divisive issue in this way. But putting that aside, on this issue, I agree that we have to be open to debate on this issue. I'm open to discussion. I'm willing to listen to those who disagree with me profoundly. But I'd also ask proponents of this bill to do the same, to listen to people who speak about rural tradition, about wildlife management, about the social and economic role of hunting in their communities, its links to national hunt racing, and to that wider sense of alienation felt across rural communities. Because it may well be the case that it will be possible to secure a ban without any of that engagement. But I don't think that would be the best approach, because I believe in doing so along that trajectory would deepen division and mistrust that we've seen all over the world. And I don't believe that's in the best interest, ultimately, of animal welfare, of social cohesion, or the working people of Ireland, rural or urban.
Thank you, Deputy. We now move to the Labour Party. Deputy Gael Nash, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you. I speak today on behalf of the Labour Party and to express our strong support for the Animal Health and Welfare Ban on Fox Hunting Bill 2025. And I want to thank our colleagues for proposing it. This legislation isn't about point scoring, and neither is it about rural Ireland versus urban Ireland. And to say that it is actually diminishes the points that some who oppose this legislation are seeking to make. It's fundamentally about decency. It's about ethics and whether we are prepared to legislate in line with what we say are our stated public values and in line with modern animal welfare standards. It is first and foremost a moral question. Now, fox hunting is an anachronistic and inherently cruel practice. It belongs to a past defined by hierarchy, elitism, exclusion, imperialism, and the routine acceptance of animal suffering. It has, in our view, no place whatsoever in a modern republic that claims to value compassion, evidence-based policy making and respect for animal welfare. There's nothing Republican about fox hunting. And conservatism, again, trumps republicanism. In recent weeks, my office, along with others, has received hundreds of emails calling for an end to fox hunting. And many of these messages come from constituents who have witnessed hunts firsthand. Their accounts strip away the romanticised language often used to defend this indefensible activity. They describe exhausted animals pursued for hours, terrified livestock, damaged land, and an organised spectacle of violence presented or misrepresented as tradition. This isn't wildlife management, it's cruelty. And I see rural pursuits now seems to be a catch-all phrase to justify anything at all that seems to happen in rural Ireland. And that again does rural Ireland and the people I represent in rural Ireland an absolute disservice. Not a monolithic, homogenous group. The public mood on this issue is clear, as has been said earlier on. A recent national opinion poll conducted by Ireland Thinks found that 72% of the Irish public support a ban on fox hunting, and importantly this opposition is strong in rural Ireland itself. It's not, as I say, a rural-urban divide. I represent, and I'm proud to represent, parts of rural County Louth too, and have done so for over 2 decades now. Yet that consensus is not reflected in the political debate. We continue to hear claims, often repeated, without any evidence whatsoever, that fox hunting is vital for farmers or essential to rural life. If fox control is required, farmers already have lawful, proportionate and humane means to address it. Organised fox hunting with packs of hounds is not, as has been said earlier, an effective or humane method of wildlife management. It is the definition, in fact, of inefficiency. A chaotic chase involving dozens of dogs and riders pursuing a single animal cannot credibly be described as pest control. It is neither targeted nor evidence-based, and it results in extreme suffering. And the claim that fox hunting is central to farming or rural culture is also contradicted by the evidence. In fact, only around 2% of the population has ever participated in a fox hunt at all. And as a sportsperson, I must say I'm not inclined to sanitise this pursuit by calling it a sport. 98% of people have no connection to it whatsoever. Never have, never will, and the numbers will diminish. A practice engaged in by such a small minority cannot reasonably be described as essential to rural life. Farmers themselves have not demanded this practice be preserved. Many I know have raised serious concerns about hunts trespassing on land, damaging crops, frightening livestock and undermining biodiversity. This is not a harmonious rural tradition. It's an imposition that many rural communities actively oppose. And there is a class context to this too. Let's not forget that, and let's not pretend otherwise. There's always been something of the upstairs, downstairs about this, and the nonsense that we used to see in the stage Irishman depiction of fox hunting and the likes of the Irish RM and so on. Absolute nonsense, far from Republican. The historical context of fox hunting in Ireland cannot be ignored. The Irish Masters of Foxhounds Association was established in 1845, during the Great Famine. And the practice itself is deeply rooted in colonial power structures. It's not a neutral or ancient Irish tradition. It's an imported thing, an imported phenomenon, a colonial blood sport imported and maintained by privilege. From an animal welfare perspective, the harms associated with fox hunting are simply unavoidable. Foxes endure prolonged pursuit, intense fear and physiological stress before often being violently killed. This suffering is intentional and it is intrinsic to the activity. Now, I'm no agricultural expert, I don't claim to be, but I know gratuitous cruelty when I see it. Horses used in hunts are also placed under extreme physical and psychological strain. They're pushed to gallop long distances over uneven ground, they jump obstacles at speed and suppress natural fear responses in chaotic environments. And this exposes them to a high risk of injury, exhaustion, chronic stress and fatal accidents. Hounds are also subjected to welfare risks. They're bred, trained and worked in ways that prioritise performance over well-being, often resulting in injury, exhaustion and premature death. Their natural behaviours are exploited and they're placed in dangerous situations over which they have no control. I've received messages from people I know and respect in recent days asking me to think of the hounds and what they do naturally. And I've one message for people listening in. They will, if these kinds of so-called rural pursuits are ended, they will evolve. They will evolve. They will change. That is an intrinsic part of nature, of who we are as human beings and what mammals do. Supporters of fox hunting often argue that banning the practice would mean horses and hounds wouldn't any longer exist. This is a false dilemma, a false dichotomy. Ending a harmful practice doesn't require the destruction of the animals involved. It doesn't make them obsolete in any way. Nature evolves, and their value, the value of each animal, endures beyond their limited, in this context, economic function to some. And this does apply, as I say, to dogs too. The claims that fox hunting builds confidence in horses or resilience in humans are also not supported by behavioural science. High-stress environments actually inhibit learning. What's often labelled as bravery is more accurately explained by learned helplessness, a state associated with welfare risks and increased injury. And while time in nature, physical activity and social connection are absolutely beneficial to mental health, none of these outcomes depend on the pursuit and the killing of wildlife. Ethical community building and well-being must not be achieved through harm to sentient beings who cannot consent. Fox hunting is frequently defended as essential to rural community life, yet participation requires significant financial and social capital, placing it beyond the reach of most people, certainly the people I represent. Presenting it as a representative of rural Ireland obscures issues of exclusion and inequality and actually does the argument on the opposite side, I think, a disservice. Rural social cohesion is a legitimate policy goal, one I pursue in my everyday work, but it must be addressed through inclusive public infrastructure and services and opportunities, not through exclusive, harmful traditions. Now, this isn't the 1800s. It's supposed to be a modern, sophisticated republic. I speak for rural Ireland too. I speak for a new rural Ireland, the changing rural Ireland, as much as others do. And as I said earlier on, our modern rural Ireland is not a monolith. The people there are not homogenous. It is a complex community with competing interests, different interests, and I think, frankly, a lot of those in here who claim that they have monopoly on speaking for those in rural Ireland do rural Ireland a disservice and don't ever reflect the diversity in modern rural Ireland that we have today and the diversity of views. The Animal Health and Welfare Bill reflects growing recognition that hunting wild mammals with dogs is incompatible with modern welfare standards. Comparable jurisdictions, including the United Kingdom, have already enacted bans, as we know, even though the argument could very well be made that that is some part of a tradition there, albeit an aristocratic landed gentry one, that goes back centuries. Ireland would not be acting, therefore, in isolation, but in line with stated commitments to animal welfare and EU principles recognising animals as sentient beings. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I think this is one of those occasions when it should be considered that a free vote would be introduced. To do otherwise, I think, would be to continue defending a cruel, unnecessary and, in our view, outdated practice that the Irish public has clearly rejected and will continue to reject. Fox hunting is not about farmers, it's not about rural life, it's, in our view, about cruelty. And it's a pursuit that should be consigned to the bin of history and a pursuit that should be put out of its misery.
Thank you, Deputy. We now move on to the Social Democrats, who have 10 minutes. That's 6, 2 and 2. So, Deputy Jennifer Whitmore, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Cahirlach. And I just want to start off by thanking Deputy Coppinger. This is a really important bill and it's very timely, so thank you for your work on this. And the Social Democrats will be 100% supporting Deputy Coppinger in this bill and her efforts to ban fox hunting. Minister, I want to be very clear. Fox hunting is wrong, fox hunting is cruel, and fox hunting has no place in the Ireland of today. And I'm really disappointed to hear what the Minister Heydon, said in his speech. I had expected the arguments to be put forward by government, I expect them to be more rational. There is an incredible amount of misinformation provided in this speech. It is something that I, to be honest, Minister, I would have expected from the independent members of the benches, because I have been debating you all on this issue over the last number of weeks. But I had thought that Fine Gael would be providing something with a bit more humanity, a bit more compassion and a bit more rational, to be honest. So let's go through the different arguments. The Minister said that he actually said that the fact that the deputies who support this bill have never met anyone being on a hunt, that undermines our case. Let me tell you, I don't need to go on a hunt to know it's cruel. I don't need to go to a bullfight to know it's cruel. I don't need to go and see badger baiting to know it's cruel, or a dog fight. If something is cruel, it is cruel. And there is a fundamental basis for animal welfare that we should be applying in this country. And it's incredible that the Minister referred to that in his speech. In relation to the matter of rural versus urban Ireland, and indeed, Minister Healy, this is something that you've put forward yourself on numerous occasions. This is not a rural versus urban debate. This is a debate on animal welfare and what we consider to be acceptable in Ireland. Interestingly, since talking about this, and I'm sure other deputies have had the same, I've had a huge number of people from rural Ireland contact me to express their outrage at fox hunting, and they want it banned. Sheep farmer in Cashel said, "Many farming neighbours agree with me that the days of having large number of horses galloping through farmland in the wettest months of the year are long gone, and that fox hunting and a means of curtailing the population is a fallacy." A Wicklow constituent, "A hunt passed through our local area and the hounds entered our garden. They split apart and savaged our beloved little dog Isabel, killing her on our own property." Someone from Cork, from a farming background, "The notion that this is a method of controlling fox population is ludicrous. Fox hunters do far more destruction to farming land and the countryside." A zoologist in Wicklow, who was also from a farming background, said hunting with hounds is one of the least effective population control methods. Farmers talking about their livestock being traumatised. And indeed, a rural West Cork man said, "I live in West Cork and there's a couple of practical things that sway me totally against fox hunting. There's no insurance company that will give cover. The damage to farmers' land and property by fox hunting. The harm to horses, cattle, sheep. No one talks about that. And yes, attacking domestic animals like household pets. It has happened. The hunt, in fact, will tell you to lock up your pets." So, Minister, I don't know who you listen to when you say and you purport to represent people from rural Ireland, because they're the voices from rural Ireland that I am hearing, and they are the ones that I will listen to. The argument about this being a good means of control of foxes is crazy. It is ridiculous. It is the most inefficient means. If you have a fox on your land that is causing problems to your livestock, there are alternative methods, such as shooting, that will be a lot more efficient than calling on packs of hounds and hunters to come through your land, through your ditches, wrecking your fences, wrecking your crops, and disturbing all the farm animals on your property. So that is, that is no argument whatsoever. The point that the Minister makes in relation to, and I accept that there are a small number of people that have actually, that they have this, have done this over many, many years, and that there could potentially be impact on their livelihoods. I accept that. But change does happen, and we have to move with the change. And what I would say to those people is find an alternative to fox hunting. Drag hunting will provide the same job opportunities, the same tourism opportunities, the same opportunities for local hoteliers to make business out of it. It is a controlled way. It means you're not wrecking farmers' land. You will only be going on farmers' land if they want you on it. And there is no cruelty involved. So find an alternative to fox hunting. The other thing that I want to say, my time is nearly up, the Minister talks about how the people shouldn't be listening just to the loud voices here. Well, I will say to you, Minister, the reason there are loud voices is because there are so many people in this country that do not want fox hunting. So many people. So rather than dismiss those loud voices, I am asking you to listen to them. Listen to those voices. Be led by your constituents, because I've had your constituents on to me, Minister, asking that this be banned. So, look, I'm going to pass over to my colleagues now, but I do thank Deputy Coppinger. I also welcome the fact that we finally have Sinn Féin, who have been placed in a position where they've had to declare their position on this. I think it's very disappointing. I do think the mask has slipped with Sinn Féin in this regard.
Deputy Eoin,
but I'll pass over to my colleagues.
Deputy. Thank you.
It's profoundly wrong to chase a defenceless animal to exhaustion and have him ripped apart by dogs and call that a sport. A barbaric and cruel practice which has no place in a modern society, a throwback to empire, a loathsome practice. Those aren't my words. They're the words of backbenchers from Sinn Féin, Fine Gael and Fianna Fail. Words that ring true. Words that matter. Words that should be reflected in votes. But tonight, in an act of indifference or cruelty, it appears those backbenchers will come into this chamber and cast their votes for restricting fox hunting, against restricting fox hunting, and for barbarism. It is truly galling to see three parties founded against colonialism to support a colonial practice like this. Fox hunting isn't just inhumane savagery. It is also one of the last cultural vestiges of that colonialism. Local gentry cosplaying as British aristocrats in an imported tradition that no Celt or Gael or Brit now engages in. The attempts to justify it as a form of pest control are ludicrous. Imagine the ridicule if Michael O'Leary and Dermot Desmond were to don loincloths and spears and go hunting for deer in the Phoenix Park and then justify it as pest control. It's so outrageous, it would be laughable if it wasn't the argument of the three big parties today. It's just wrong. It's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. Well, the Social Democrats know what's wrong and what's right. Barbaric torture of animals is wrong. Upholding cruel colonial practices is wrong. Blood sports for the pleasure of the wealthy is wrong. Fox hunting is wrong. And the parties and deputies who vote against this bill are wrong too.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Jen Cummins, you have.
I'd like to thank Deputy Ruth Coppinger for bringing forward this bill to ban fox hunting. And I suppose it might seem very unlikely that a city TD like myself from Dublin South Central would have any interest in what is constantly being said affects rural areas and communities. Well, if you bear with me for a minute, I'll explain my position. When I was a child, I spent my time between suburban Dublin from Ruth Coppinger's constituency and also in rural Cavan, where my granny and her people are from. And my mother lived there for the last part of her life, and I spent many weekends up in Cavan with my granduncle, driving a tractor, going to fields, feeding cattle, helping on his farm, and then also moving cattle from field to field. And as a suburban young person, I also spent my weeks going to school, going to youth theatre, friends' houses, and hanging out on the estate. But what I'll say from both of those lives is that both rural and suburban, we loved our animals. And that was from people on both sides. So this is nothing to do with where you live. This is about loving animals and respecting animals. And I would say that when it comes, earlier the Minister was saying that foxes are not a protected species, but that doesn't mean that they can be treated the way that they're treated in a fox hunt. They have feelings, they are animals, they have feelings, therefore they're capable of the fear and dread from being chased by humans and horses and hounds. Fox hunting is banned in the UK, Germany, the Netherlands and Belgium, and it really is time that Ireland evolved and stopped this cruel and barbaric activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. We now move to the Independent Technical Group. They have 10 minutes. We have 4 speakers, 2.5 minutes per speaker. And I now call on Deputy Michael Collins.
Thanks very much indeed, Chairperson. This debate once again exposes a growing divide in country between those who live and work in rural Ireland and those who comment on it from a distance, with little understanding of what life is actually like on the ground in rural Ireland. Foxes are a real and present danger to livestock, to livelihoods and increasingly to public safety. Only last week there were reports of a woman in Cavan being attacked by a fox. That is not something rural families ever expect to hear, but it is a warning of what happens when wildlife populations are allowed spiral out of control. Farmers see consequences every year. Lambs slaughtered during the lambing season. Hens ripped limb to limb in a single night. Years of careful breeding wiped out without warning. This is the reality of nature when it is not properly managed. Rural Ireland is a managed landscape. It always has been. Without management, it does not magically balance itself. It deteriorates. We only have to look at the deer crisis to see the consequences: animals roaming roads, cars destroyed, families put at risk, and no accountability. Do we really want the same situation with foxes? Sick, starving animals wandering roadways, no longer fit to source food, dying slow deaths that serve no one. And yet, we have a city-based TDs who know nothing about this reality, attacking rural traditions and practices that exist precisely to keep balance and protect both animals and people. One of the loudest anti-rural voices is Deputy Coppinger, who claims to speak for communities. But what does it say about the commitment when she had no difficulty in objecting to a development of over 200 apartments in her own city? This type of objection is devastating to communities where people across the country are desperate for a roof over their heads. We are told she cares about communities, yet she denigrates the Common Agricultural Policy, a policy designed to keep farm families afloat, families who have worked the same land for decades, often centuries. She dismisses it as part of what she calls a global capitalist system of agriculture. That kind of ideological thinking has a long and dark history. Wherever it has been imposed on farming communities, it has driven families off their land, stripped them of ownership, and handed agriculture over to the state in so-called communal systems that resulted in starvation and deaths of millions. That is the ideology of Deputy Coppinger. That is what this so-called bill is based on: anti-farmer, anti-rural, poisonous ideology that wants to punish those who work to own land and work that land for the betterment for themselves and their communities. Rural Ireland does not lecture from extremists.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Richard O'Donoghue, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And I watched everyone standing up here with notebooks in front of them speaking, and you know something, it was rhetoric stuff that they were speaking. It was the same stuff coming out of their mouths. There's no urban and rural divide here. I have people from the urban area that come out hunting out to our area, and they've done it for decades. But I'm from a farming background. I live in an area where there's cover behind me. The hunt comes throughout the back of our land every time on the season. I've seen the devastation of what a fox has done to people's, when the cow was calving, what they've done to the cow, it was calving outside in the field. I've seen what it's done to lambs. But I've also seen what the hunt has done in areas of curtailing foxes in an area. I've also seen in our own place myself, and we had 2 sets of hens, which we always kept hens. They were actually savage in our own area, so now I don't have hens. But from the point of view of people, and people are saying the foxes are now making their way into the city. And they are. And people are feeding foxes in the city. And if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. But when this overpopulating thing comes, and they say that there's no hunting, that means you cannot defend if a fox is doing something to your animals. It means you cannot defend, like that woman in Cavan that got 6 stitches during the week, defending her chickens. We're not talking about all day, every day. There's a hunting season, the same as there's a slurry season. There's all seasons for everything. But they also never asked, and people stood up here today and said that they're not from a veterinary background. There's vets involved in this. The veterinary service are involved in this. Now, Social Democrats last year tried to ban greyhound hunting. And they were on the television saying, this is the greyhounds, it's desperate against greyhounds. And they were out the front saying that they had a greyhound, and it wasn't a greyhound at all, it was a lurcher. They didn't even realise they had a greyhound. They didn't even know what a greyhound was. The same thing is happening here today. They don't understand the process that's happening here. They didn't actually follow the science, and they're talking about a minority of people saying 2%. How many percent of this country look after us in our Garda services? If you look at the percentage, how many of our people in this country are medical people, but yet they look after a population of millions? But you're talking about percentages. Get your facts right before you start discussing things that you know nothing about.
Thank you. sorry, Deputy. Deputy Gogarty, you're next.
I'm just wondering, when we're discussing this, can we just ask the deputies to state whether they have any financial involvement in hunts or the provision of services?
I have none. I have none. None.
That's all I'm asking.
Deputy Gogarty. Sorry, Deputy Gogarty, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you.
It's hardly scurrilous to ask for transparency, Minister. That's what you're worried about. I'd be concerned about that. It is transparency and it is your responsibility. It is your responsibility in this chamber to be clear about any financial benefit.
Please take your seats. Deputy Minister, please. Minister, please take your seat. Minister, please. Please, Minister. Deputy Gogarty, you have 2.5 minutes. Minister.
Give Deputy Fitzmaurice extra time.
Yes, Deputy Gogarty, 2.5 minutes.
To be clear, foxes are wild animals. They can be dangerous. They carry leptospirosis. They have tapeworm. They have toxoplasmosis. They will bite humans if they're hungry. They will attack domestic animals like cats and dogs if they can get away with it. I even heard a story of one robbing a spice bag off someone recently in an urban area. They will kill lambs, especially weak lambs after birth. Foxes are hunters. They are predators. You've heard the phrase sly as a fox. That's because they're clever animals. They are not domestic pets, although some people, as Deputy Minister says, feeds them in urban areas. But having said all that, they're dumb animals, but not as dumb as the animals that hunt them. Because there is no rational argument for killing a defenceless wild animal for pleasure. It is the worst form of abuse. It's not for anything else. It's to get off on watching those hounds tear the fox apart. Nothing else. It's uncivilised. It's on par with genital mutilation. It's on par with the way people used to get away with whacking their partners in domestic abuse cases. It's a tradition, but it's a tradition that's long past its time. And as others have said, there are alternatives. We have the drag hunting. We have the clean boot hunting. You can get on your horse. You can have your rural pursuits. You can ride on the land. You can chase. You can have all your social interactions. You can have all your dress balls. You can have everything except tearing the fox apart. I'm not against culling fox population if it's causing danger to people. But this isn't about culling fox population. It's about having pleasure at the expense of an animal. And I'm particularly disappointed there is no open vote on this with Fianna Fail and Fine Gael, and especially Sinn Féin. One of my constituency colleagues talked last week about his partner's beautiful whippet called Padme that brings so much joy to their lives. And yet he told me also that he would be not opposing greyhound racing because that's a working man's sport and I'll take the hit, he said. Well, fox hunting couldn't be described as a working man's sport, but they're still going to take the hit. So instead of chucking our law, it's chucking our law, tally-ho, chaps, let's keep it going, keep the vestiges of the British Empire. Let's cop on, have a free vote, get rid of this barbaric practice.
Thank you. Deputy Michael Fitzmaurice.
And I welcome to be able to speak on this. First thing I want to say is that I have no financial or otherwise interest in hunters, and second of all, I don't even own a gun, so I can't be accused of being lopsided because of it. Neosporosis, a lot of people wouldn't even know what it is. But if you're a farmer in rural Ireland and your calves or the cows are aborting, you'll know all about it, which comes from foxes. And where overpopulation happens, we come from a managed landscape. We come from a landscape where we saw a few years ago the problem from Kerry right to Donegal throughout the country of the overpopulation of deers. We saw where people driving the roads had to dig into their own insurance or dig into their own pockets because of the overpopulation of deers. There was herds of deers running around the country, and you have to keep things controlled. And for me, they wouldn't have a gun. If I happen someone in a hunt, if you have sheep lambing and you're out at night, it isn't a great sight to see when you talk about all the things that happens a fox. It isn't a nice sight to see the head of your lamb gone, or most of your lamb ate. That's pretty rough for a farmer to see. And just people that are genuinely interested in making sure that there's a viable amount of everything in a managed landscape. Do they want to see an old fox waddling along the road not able to even get enough of food for themselves. Or tell the person, as and I see Senator Brady up there highlighted, the person in Cavan that thought the fox was going to be a nice tame animal and that they'd be their pet that had to get 5 stitches. Tell that to them, because what people don't understand, in cities at the moment people are feeding foxes. It's like trying to tame a wild duck. It doesn't happen. You bring them 3/4 there and they'll snarl back at you and catch you. And you need to live in the rural areas to understand the rural areas. People talk about why is there hunting and why is there gun clubs or whatever. Because the farmer that's affected during the week, when you go out in the morning and see the lamb or whatever that's gone, you have to contact someone. You don't just ring up and see the fox running up the field. It happened hours ago. And what you need is them to come at weekends to make sure that they find the problem in the area, and overpopulation is a major problem.
We move on now to other members. You have 10 minutes. Deputy Danny Healy-Ray, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Cathy. Look, I'm glad to get the opportunity to talk on this very important matter here today, but I can tell you all, I will not be voting for a ban on fox hunting, because, and for fear people think that there's an urban-rural divide. There's no such thing as an urban-rural divide down the country. Maybe there's something inside the pale here that don't understand rural Ireland, but in rural Ireland we have towns that depend on the farming community and depend on the sheep farmers and depend on the cattle farmers. And indeed, when we see everything else closed down during the virus, the one thing that kept the country moving forward was the farming community. And there's different things that are hurting the farmers continuously back over the years, and foxes are those. I can remember my grandmother's time, she used to have a few turkeys for Christmas, that was her money when she'd sell them, and some of her turkeys were taken for one Christmas, and that meant some of her income that she was depending on wasn't there for her, because the fox took away two of her turkeys that she was after feeding since July or August. This is happening continuously. I know one good friend of mine, Andrew in Kildare, he had 13 hens, seeing after them, minding them and feeding them and being very careful with them, and he came home one evening and 12 of the hens were gone. And that's the gospel truth. Pat up the road, same story, he had ducks, and he makes a few pounds from ducks at the fairs and stuff like that. He's constantly being taken out by the foxes. I had someone the other day even, there are 2 cats, there are 2 lovely cats were taken by the fox. And lambs, I'll just talk, and I don't mind whether it is considered a financial interest or not, but it is an interest. My own son, Dan, at one stage had 18 lambs taken this year in the springtime by the foxes. And whether it is hunters or whether it is shooters or whoever take out the fox, I appreciate them for that. Farmers appreciate them for that. And I can't understand why these people that are so concerned about the foxes are not concerned about the hens when they're tore alive. They're not concerned about the lambs when their heads are tore off and when their legs are gone and they're riddled, poor, defenceless little lambs. I don't know what reason people have got against those that never do any harm to anyone, only make a few pounds for the farmers that are struggling. And even their sheep payment has been reduced a small bit this year, and we're hoping that we'll get it back again next year. One of the things that the deputy that's bringing forward this bill said, the farmers are all right, they get grants. Well, they don't get a grant for the place, the money that the lamb would have made, and that's the gospel truth. They do not. And when you're answering this, ministers, I wanted to address that issue. They do not get a grant when the lamb is taken away or riddled or half eaten and half left there. they get no grant for that. And I want you to withdraw that remark because he made it. And he said then that the cause of the foxes doing harm was development. So these same deputies don't want a development of houses, I can see. We know that they're objecting to them, and they're here then, by the way, for the good of the people. They are not. And it's very wrong to tote around that way, because that's not the truth. And people need houses, but we do need farmers. We have many people now on the hillsides sheep farming because they're not paying. Sadly, they're not paying, and many farmers have cut down the number of lambs or the number of ewes that they keep because they haven't the whereas for to traverse these massive hills and valleys and to keep and see after them, endorse them, and all the cost that's with them. But they have cut down numbers, but they really need to have what they have and not to be taken by the fox. I think it's very wrong to be coming in here trying to hurt someone. My late father used to say, if you can't help someone, he said, please don't hurt them. And that that take with me every road I've gone. If you can't help someone, please don't hurt them. And that's what I don't ever intend to do. I hope that I can make something better for someone every day I get up and before I go to bed at night again. But I certainly wouldn't be trying to stop farmers of killing foxes, because we know what the fox do. And it's the way it's their psyche or whatever it is. They don't need all the lambs they kill, because they leave some of them after them and tear them asunder. And I can't understand why these people that are intent on bringing in this bill are so vehement about this, and at the same time they have no concern at all for the poor lamb or the hen or the ducks or all those things that people work hard at. And then to see them taken in a flash, and when they come back, they're gone. Indeed, there was two men very lately, they went down the fields because the fox was after taking some of the hens. And then they're coming up, they met the fox down again with another hen in his mouth. That's the truth. Look, all I have to say, we must vote against this. I'm appealing to all the deputies from around the country that are depending on farmers for their votes. Now's your time to come out and stand with the farmers tonight and vote against this bill, because it's not fair or it's not right. And I'm saying to those people on the other side that are trying to bring this forward, if you can't help someone, why are you trying to hurt them? And it's very wrong to do that to people. These poor farmers down the country and up the country and in the west side of the country, they are depending on lambs, and to a lesser extent the people are depending on hens to have their own eggs, and they like to do that. And why are we trying to hurt them by bringing a law or a bill here banning fox hunting? It's totally and absolutely wrong, and you should be ashamed of yourselves to be even thinking it and talking about it, and not to mind bringing in a bill here. It's a sad way our country has gone. And you know, we have a lot of important things to debate here inside, and we shouldn't have to debate this, but seeing as that we have to debate it, we will debate it. And we will vote against it tonight. And I'm assuring the people out there what I'm doing. I'll be voting against this fox hunting bill by the Deputy Coppinger and whoever else is standing with her, because it's not fair on rural Ireland, and it's not fair. And when I say rural Ireland, I mean the towns and villages, because those people depend on the farmers as well for their income. They all get a bit out of it, and if the lamb goes down the field and the fox's mouth or is tore alive and left for dead, no one will get anything out of them. And this thing about a financial interest, You may think we were after, betting in some stock exchange or something, and that we were going to gain from it or something. It's such a ridiculous statement for a deputy to make, saying we have financial interest. We have an interest in the well-being of the farmers around the country. We have an interest in the people that keep poultry and depend on them, and put money into them. These things don't fall out of the sky, and there's several other things, and it's very sad when you go into a field and you'll see the ewe going around the field looking for a lamb, and bang and upset. You've no interest in that. How is that? And I can't understand that and appreciate that. Look, ministers, I'm appealing to you as the government, as part of the government, to ensure that the government, to a man and woman, votes against this fox hunting bill tonight, as I will be doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy. That brings an end to contributions. I now call on the government side to make the reply, and that's the Minister of State, Michael Healy. You have 10 minutes, Minister.
Yes, thank you very much, Gael. And at the very outset, to make it very clear, the government will be absolutely 100% opposing this bill as it is proposed. And I want to call it out here right now for what it is. Extremely misleading, and I would go so far as saying a con job. And I'll tell you why. The bill, as currently drafted, proposes to ban all hunting for foxes, regardless of the purpose of that hunting and the manner in which it is being carried out. Now, that has been ignored here several times today by several speakers. They're giving the impression that this is about people up on horses, with red coats and shouting tally-ho. That is rubbish. What this bill is proposing to do, and the people that are saying otherwise obviously haven't read it in its entirety, because what it is saying is to farmers, if you're a farmer who has lambs outside in the field, and if you want to protect your lambs, it is making you a criminal tomorrow if you want to go out and shoot those foxes tonight. And that is exactly the legal opinion of what you are proposing here today. So we'll make that very, very clear. We'll make that very, very clear. And you know, Deputy Gogarty, I wasn't going to go talking about you at all, but seeing as you are interrupting me, you completely misled everything here, because you obviously didn't read the bill, because you actually don't know what you're talking about. Because if you did, you wouldn't have said what you actually said. Now, a lot has been said about the 73% of people who say no, and that they don't want this type of fox hunting to continue. There's only one important statistic left out of that, and that is the fact that 98% of those people, when they were asked, they said they never saw a hunt, they never saw foxes being killed, they never saw anything. All they're doing is listening to media reports about this. So we have 73% talking about something that 98% of them know absolutely nothing about it in the first instance. Now, I do want to take issue with a comment that was made earlier on by Deputy Coppinger, and that was with regard to hill farming. And you spoke as if you knew what you were talking about. Unfortunately, again, you obviously didn't, because you did mention a word that Deputy Denny Healy-Rae mentioned a minute ago. That was about grants. Now, are you living in the real world? Are you trying to suggest to a farmer that will go out into a field tomorrow and that will find lambs dead? And I'll explain to you when I say dead. Yes, their throats will have been pulled apart by your beautiful foxes. Their limbs will have been torn asunder in the same way as the hens will be. But you seem to give a suggestion that, oh, well, it's all right, you know, the farmers will get a grant. Rubbish. They will lose financially. Not just that, but also nothing about the torture that the lambs go through. Nothing about the torture that the hens or the geese go through. Now, I've heard it earlier on being said to compare dogs with foxes. This is wrong, it is dangerous, and it is absolutely misleading. I was shocked earlier on to hear Roderic O'Gorman, but then again, his lack of knowledge is amplified already before by the Green Party when it comes to being out of touch with rural issues. It's not the first time showing a lack of knowledge about issues such as this. But what today is about, and I don't welcome this debate, but I welcome the fact that we'll be able to vote it down tonight. But what this is all about, it's about the constant attack, whether it's the greyhounds, whether it's the greyhound industry, whether it's horse racing, whether it's fishing. You all seem to hate all of a sudden this word rural pursuits. But why do you hate it? because it means so much to so many people. It's like shooting. What in the name of God? Maybe you think it's wrong to go out and shoot grey crows. Do you know what a grey crow does to a lamb, a defenceless lamb? If a lamb is anywhere weak or sick, the grey crow will come down from the sky and pull the two eyes out of the lamb. You don't want to hear that, because you think then the person that goes out and shoots the grey crow is wrong. You want to continue, as do other people, your continuous attack on rural Ireland. And again, take the deer, for example. People are now realising that we have an overpopulation of deer in this country. We have to reduce that figure by 75%. This is management of rural Ireland. You can't just say we'll leave everything go as it is. But if you had your way, you would do away with live export. You would do away with pig farming. You would do away with the whole idea of people having hen farms and rearing chickens and all of that. Any type of farming, intensified dairying, anything, you're against it all. So, and when I heard Paul Murphy earlier on talking about this cruel and barbaric affair, you don't seem to care at all about what the foxes do and the cruelty that they inflict on other animals. People spoke earlier on about badgers. Do you realise that our senior minister is engaged at the moment in a most important issue, and that is the protection of our herd from TB? And the badgers are absolutely a leading contributor in the spread of TB. But again, that's something that you don't know anything about. It's an absolute, it's a scientific,
Danny, sorry.
It's a scientific fact. But of course the other side don't want to hear that because they think the badgers are beautiful. Well, I'll tell you, tell that to a farmer that tomorrow morning, or like a good friend of mine who yesterday saw 17 in calf heifers having to leave his yard because of the fact that they had contracted TB. Why? Because of badgers. So yes, we have to eradicate badgers.
Deputy.
Yes,
Deputy.
we have to eradicate our deers. And we have to manage rural Ireland. And when I hear people talking about colonial pursuits, again, that's trying to give the public out there today this message that, oh, this is only about people up on horses running after the poor fox. It is not. It's about the poor farmer that has to get up in the middle of the night to go out to try and identify and follow and track and kill a fox because the fox is killing his lambs or her lambs. So that's what everybody over there wants to ignore, and it has been extremely misleading to have heard the speeches of some people here. I want to recognise Deputy Cronin, who did actually read the bill, because if you heard her speech, which of course, and it's entirely her opinion, but at least she knew what she was talking about. Unlike other people who just seem to be taking the narrative that is put out there. I want to reserve a very special word for Deputy Whitmore, and I'm so sorry, like a wasp, she came in, stung and ran. But I want to answer her back. And on behalf of both myself and Deputy Denny Healy, I want to say one thing to her. This is the lady who is so anti-farming that she did her best at a critical time when Minister Martin Heydon was doing everything he could to lead a campaign to continue a nitrates derogation. She did everything she could to sabotage it, to undermine it, to go in the media, to make a presentation to Commissioner Rosbal where she completely tried undermining our hard-working farmers in Ireland. But she failed, the same way she'll fail tonight. But the reason why I reserve a special word for her on behalf of myself and Deputy Denny is because she made a mention that she was contacted by some of our constituents. Well, I'll remind the same deputy, if she says, which she actually said on the record, she's wondering who are we representing, I'll remind her of a small fact. Maybe the fact that when 30%, up to 30% of the electorate went out to vote, they voted for a Healy Ray, maybe she'd stick that in her pipe and smoke it, because you can't go against the electorate, they're the bosses. Could she say the same thing about herself, or her political party, or any of them over there? If they got 30% of the vote, they'd be in orbit. But also then, when I heard Deputy Eoin Hayes, because when I'm on a roll, I'll take them out one by one. I heard what he said about the Brits, and he going on talking absolute rubbish. Again, because he didn't read it. Again, because he didn't understand it. Again, because he doesn't care about the farmers that want to protect their livestock. Deputy Fitzmaurice rightly earlier on, in a very knowledgeable and sound way, mentioned another thing. And that is about the fact of what the diseases that the foxes actually spread. And the fact that cows can lose calves and everything because of diseases they can contract. He rightfully raised that matter, and he was the only person inside here that raised it. Now, but I also want to point out the fact that what has happened here over the last couple of weeks is completely misleading. Again, because it misportrayed what she's actually trying to do. She's attacking rural Ireland. She's attacking our farming community. And the people that are with her are misrepresenting what they're actually trying to do. And I'm delighted that you lose tonight, you lose the vote, and the people that want to continue killing foxes will be entitled to do so, and you won't take away their pursuit.
That finishes the government. So I'll now ask the proposer of the bill, Deputy Ruth Coppinger, to finish, to have her closing remarks, and you have 10 minutes. Deputy.
Thanks. Well, we'll leave aside the dripping misogyny that we've had to sit and listen to for the past few minutes from somebody who's sitting in the Department of Agriculture, talking about Deputy Whitmore, talking about myself. But I'll deal with the issues that the government and the other parties have raised. So it's very clear you're trying to make a culture war out of something that's very simple. It's about cruelty to the fox, which none of you who've spoken against the bill have even bothered to deal with, whether you think it's cruel or not to the fox. All of the other extraneous issues have been talked about. Now, I agree that rural life is in crisis. I absolutely agree with that. You might be surprised to think that, but it's in crisis for a lot of reasons. Well, how do you know what I know? Actually, don't live in a city. I live in a suburb. I spent my childhoods in the country. Right? So, but whether or not it's how I feel when you start talking about women and women's rights and women's bodies, I just have to sit and listen to it. But when I want to talk about a rural area, all of a sudden I don't have a right. So just cop on. We're here. National TDs, national issues, we can raise whatever we like. So rural life is in crisis because of the FDI economic model that this government has encouraged from day one. Centralisation. I don't agree with everything being centralised around Dublin or around Leinster. I don't agree with Dublin Airport being, passenger cap being just lifted, for example. We should be decentralising. I don't agree with the lack of infrastructure. And I don't agree with the housing crisis, which is making it very difficult for people to have homes in rural Ireland. And I don't believe. Please. I also don't agree with, pubs, post offices, all of those things being lost in rural areas. But those are the policies that are led by Fianna Fail, Fine Gael, who you're in government with. So Minister, I want to raise about some of the alternatives to fox hunting, because I didn't get a chance to mention them. So to be clear, drag hunting is something I absolutely have no issue with. It allows people to go out on horses or go out with their dogs. They follow an artificial scent across agreed routes. Clean boot hunting is another one that's been done in the UK. So what this bill doesn't deal with is a number of things. It doesn't deal with shooting. So somebody can shoot a fox, it doesn't mention it. And when you're drafting a bill, if something doesn't mention it, it means it's not in it. So we heard issues from Sinn Féin that it was their position in their Ardèche that they'd had a debate. Gun clubs were mentioned continually. This has nothing to do with gun clubs. This is about fox hunting. That people don't go out with a cruel intent. It doesn't matter about your intent if the end object is that a fox is going to be caught and killed in a prolonged way. It is cruel. Drag hunting is another alternative you might argue for at your Ardèche. And this thin end of the wedge argument No, we're dealing with one issue. We're dealing with fox hunting. You vote on that and you vote on that alone and leave the deliberate misrepresentation out of it. Deputy Kenny said he'd had a groundswell of support. The groundswell of support has come from people in favour of the bill. Like, let's be clear, there's been massive, social media, the number of people who've gotten behind this in the 7 months since I raised it at first stage. Now, Deputy Cronin talked about her personal beliefs colliding with her party. And she talked about how she has to go in and vote for this because United Ireland is her priority and she's involved in a collective struggle. First of all, there was a suggestion that I'm splitting the left by raising stuff. I'm going to come in and raise issues to do with anyone who's oppressed or animals that are being brutally treated. I can't wait around for Sinn Féin to change its policy. I'm sorry. If I'd waited for that, we wouldn't have had repeal. I was putting repeal bills in here. Sinn Féin was sitting on socially conservative on issues. I'm sorry, I can't wait for you to catch up, That's not why I was elected. So I was elected to push things forward, not wait and sit and wait for the rest of you to catch up. It's not the only people who are splitting the left is people who don't agree that animal rights is a priority issue for the left. It is a priority issue. People who are serious about a progressive left would want to question why they can't convince their party conference to get rid of fox hunting. I mean, you really should be able to push how important that is. And Deputy Carthy talked about regulating, and the problem is it is regulated. And as we can see, it's a free-for-all in reality because there's so much happening. I just want to finish on that point by saying TDs were mentioned because a number of TDs have told people when they were going to vote last year that they were against blood sports, that they were against fox hunting. People are absolutely entitled to contact those TDs and say, vote with us tonight. Like, get a grip here, to say that we're somehow targeting TDs. And that included people in Fianna Fail and Fine Gael. But it just so happens a lot of TDs in Sinn Féin gave people the impression that Sinn Féin was against fox hunting and against blood sports. So Sinn Féin didn't have their Ardèche in the autumn. I understand they had to postpone it. That was a good reason to allow free vote tonight, because you hadn't got time to change your position. But everybody who went and voted last year would have expected, most people certainly, that Sinn Féin was in line with this bill. I just want to say about the hostility to rural life that's been talked about. I think there is a sellout coming up on Mercosur and other EU issues that this government is going to sell out the people that it drums up in rural areas. And this is a nice distraction for you, to talk about fox hunting and to make out that it's the big bad people from Dublin coming here, taking all of our, livelihoods away. I do recognise that people do have livelihoods involved in this. I'm absolutely open to discussion, but I do think there are alternatives, I'll explain about the Grant Minister. You obviously misunderstood what I said. What I said...
Minister,
it's my time to speak now.
Please.
I know you find that hard. The other issue is, why are we talking about this now? Because I get private members' time 1.5 times a year. That's why we're talking about it now. It's not a plot, to make anyone look bad. It was either now or somehow. And the reason it put it now is because it became a big issue in the presidential election. And I really thought a number of people would have caught up. So on the thing about a grant, the point I was making, we had a briefing here last week. Unfortunately, people from rural areas were there. We had a number of people. We had Frankie Ward, who has produced booklets talking about how this can be integrated into farming life, who's done surveys among sheep farmers, who's talked about ways to protect livestock. And one of the issues I raised, the grant was in the context of allowing hill farmers, who might be more open, obviously, to their sheep being taken, to have grants to help protect their sheep. That you're in government now, so that would have been something that you could have helped with. Just in finishing, there's a whole load of people who are going to come in here tonight and press a button against this bill. 80% of people are opposed to blood sports. 80% of people are opposed to fox hunting if you exclude don't knows. If you include them, it was 73% in the last poll They're from all around the country, rural and urban Ireland. We have a problem in this House, in this place. 3 of the big parties are going to come in here and vote the exact opposite of what most of the population wants. Now, you can make up any excuse you like that you're representing rural Ireland or whatever, but the reality is that was why I called for a free vote, to at least allow TDs who've given the general public the impression that they will uphold what they said they stood for, to express that tonight. This isn't a rural-urban issue. And just in finishing, these are some of the quotes from rural people who've contacted me. So I mentioned Frankie Ward. Randall Plunkett, who's also here, and I'd like to welcome the people who've attended here. We've a packed gallery because you can see what an issue this is, who runs the Dunsany Nature Reserve, has talked about the battle that he has had getting these fox hunters to agree to keep off his land, and they completely ignored, gone to the police, nothing happens. That is the experience of loads of people throughout rural Ireland. Testimony from a farmer in County Waterford as well about how they arrived unannounced on horseback or on foot. The Comra Harriers, complaints about them. I could go on. I've only 15 seconds left. Testimony from rural Galway. People in rural Ireland do not support fox hunting. Minister, you've got interests in tourism. Maybe you're gaining financially from this, but very few people are in rural Ireland, and there's other pursuits that could be encouraged to replace it. We need to support what the 80% of this population wants.
Thank you. Thank you, deputies. And the question now is that the bill... sorry, deputies, please. The question is that the bill is now read a second time. Is that agreed? Agreed. Not agreed. Deputies in favour say Tá. Deputies against say Níl. Question is lost. Vote all, and that will be deferred to the division this evening. Thank you, deputies.